am Jason Waller here. That's right, with Jason Waller Unleashed, top 10 podcast on society and culture and entrepreneurship. I have got an awesome guest on today. I'm a big fan. He's an ex-Lions player, but more importantly, he has totally made a name for himself. He is crushing it on ESPN. I'm a huge fan. I know you guys are a huge fan of what he's doing as commentating and being an ESPN analyst. Super excited. My man, Dan Orlovsky, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to be on. I know we back and forth scheduling all that and being at this time of the year with the draft just about here. It's good to be on with you, man.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. How great was last year to see the Lions finally get pretty far in the playoffs? I know that's one of your teams, if not your team. Yeah. How great did that feel?
It was awesome, to watch that season unfold for so many different reasons. People often ask me, do you have a favorite team or did you have a favorite team? And I didn't really have a favorite team growing up as a kid. And I always say, I'll always root for the Lions. They're the ones who drafted me and gave me my first chance. And, even though things didn't go well when I was there, you're rooting for them. And then obviously I played with Dan Campbell. I was with Jared Goff, his second year in the NFL. So there's a lot of ties to that. I'm such a fan of the people. I used to always say, man, even though we didn't win, those people showed up and they were passionate and they beloved their Lions players. So to watch it kind of play out and into fruition and see the success that they had and then the wave of almost America getting behind them, it was awesome to see.
Yeah, it was really awesome because everyone with the SOL, the same old Lions and hiring Dan Campbell and all the punchlines, just for him to be a player's coach, the opposite, nothing wrong with the New England system, but look, teams evolve, players evolve, the world evolves, right?
Sure.
And, from what we had from that regime before to that was a completely different approach. And it really worked because we had, and I didn't get the chance to meet Caldwell. I did meet the coach in between. And, Dan Campbell is a player's coach, is my understanding, kind of like Caldwell, but he actually played the game and he takes risks that matter and fires up his team, works out with his team. Have you seen anything like that on any other team?
Not in the NFL, really. I don't know. Sean McVay has got that element. I was with Sean. Sean had that element of like, you felt best friends with him, but you had that respect for him as the coach, and I think Dan's got that, and Dan has a reputation of who he was as a player. Nothing was given to him and he enjoyed, it's almost like Eric Spoelstra. Like he enjoys doing things that are difficult and earning them. And I think there's an appreciation from the players. It's also a significantly more talented football team. You got to give some love to Brad Holmes as well for the roster that's been built. And I think that when, in today's NFL, when you have a head coach that, gets, demands everything from their guys without asking for anything, that's rare. And it feels like that's what Dan has got there is like, he demands everything out of that group, but he doesn't ask them for anything, and it's almost like that daily lifestyle in many elements. And I think they've got the right group of people to be a part of that.
Are you excited about the draft? Because I've seen, you posted something on Twitter recently of look how amazing these top prospects were in high school. And I'm a big JJ McCarthy fan, know him and his family. My son actually worked out with his quarterbacks coach a few times. So shouts out to him. But I'm a big fan of all these quarterbacks coming out. And I want to pick your brain on that, because I've seen some of your clips where you're talking about, the pros and cons of Caleb, the pros and cons of Jaden Daniels, Drake May, all of these guys, JJ. Penix, Bo Nix. If you had to rank the quarterbacks, obviously, anytime there's a draft, anytime something's going on, there's something that it depends on the team they're on, the culture they're on, the system. All that matters, correct?
Yep. But just if you're telling me to rank them off physical talent, like who do I think is the best at actually playing quarterback?
I would say yes. I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for you to say that, and then I'm looking for you to say, based on who you think's going to go where. I know that's a hard assumption.
Sure.
How likely is it going to be? Is their career going to be, how would you rank their careers going to be? 'Cause the reason I bring that up is maybe you're going to say Caleb Williams is the most talented, right? That's what most people think, and maybe that's the case. But he's going in a situation, my opinion, I don't do what you do for a living by no means, but my opinion, if they don't have a good winning season, they may fire their coach, and now you get a new offensive coordinator, new coach.
Yep.
All of that plays into this in the system thing where great talent goes to the team that just kind of messes it up, and they never get to really grow in the league. I just wanted your opinion on the top 5 that you think if you were running a team, who would you be picking first out of these 5?
Yeah, if I was running the team, just taking the physical talent or the off the tape, I would go Jaden Daniels out of LSU number 1. I would go Caleb Williams out of USC number 2. I would go JJ out of Michigan 3, Drake 4, and then Bo Nix 5. Now, who do I think is going to end up paying? I think Caleb's career is going to be very good. Likely the number 1 pick in Chicago. I just think Chicago right now is the best place for a number 1 drafted quarterback to go ever when it comes to good offensive line, good skill players, a defense that was top 5 in the NFL back half of the season last year, good offensive system. Like, rarely does a quarterback go into a place when he's picked number 1 overall that is that healthy. I also feel that Jaden Daniels going number 2 will have a really good career in Washington because they got 2 really good receivers and a good tailback, and I think Adam Peters, the general manager, is going to rebuild that team. So I do think that those 2 guys, I feel really good about having good careers. If you told me J.J. McCarthy goes to Minnesota, I think he's the leader for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think that he's custom made to go thrive in that offense. Drake May has to be given the Jordan Love treatment. Like, Drake's wildly talented, but he's mechanically flawed. And if we look in the last 5 or 6 years of guys that are mechanically flawed and they go into the NFL and they play early on, they struggle. They, from Mitchell Trubisky to, Justin Fields to Zach Wilson, you can't be mechanically flawed to go play. You got to sit like Jordan did. So I do think he's got incredible physical talent. Like, to your point, Jason, Caleb was the number 1 ranked quarterback coming out of high school. Jaden Daniels was the number 1 ranked quarterback coming out of high school. JJ was number 5 and Drake was number 9. I mean, these guys are just freakishly talented players. So, and then I think if Bo Nix goes to Denver, there's a really good chance that he has a really good, career with Sean Payton. He, point guard type of quarterback. I think those are like places where I'd be very intrigued about them.
What do you think about the Pittsburgh situation? Do you think Russell Wilson's going to stay quarterback all year, or you think it's going to go to Justin Fields?
I think if it is a legit open competition, Justin Fields will be their week 1 starter. I think Justin is still more talented. I think Justin has played moments of good football in a bad situation and, cards stacked against him. I just don't know how likely it is to be a fully open competition. I don't know if Mike Tomlin at Pittsburgh will do that, because if it's not fully open and it's Russell Wilson's job to lose, he won't lose it. He'll play consistent, kind of patient football and not give the ball away. He doesn't turn the football over. And Justin, it's going to be hard for Justin to take that job away in the preseason when you don't really get hit that much. You're not going to play a ton of reps. You're playing against backups. How likely is it that he does this play versus this defense in the NFL? So I think it's a better situation quarterback-wise than they've been in for the past couple of years. Yeah. But it's tough for me to think that if Russell's given the job, he gives it away.
See how detailed you get into this? I've talked to other people, and they don't talk football as good as you do in most cases. Like, you are so, I mean, you're talking about the mechanical that's flawed on ex-players. You're speaking about the systems and how much time they get into preseason and the reps that they're getting. So this is all great stuff, and this is why I get excited watching you on ESPN and doing your thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. The other thing I want to ask you about is I'm a Lions fan, so it's a homer talk for me when we talk Detroit. Hendon Hooker and Jared Goff. Now, my thing is, I pull for the underdog because when you're a Lions fan, naturally you're just an underdog person, right? And when Stafford left, Stafford was my favorite player besides Barry of all time. And then when he left, it wasn't his fault he left, but it was like, man, I don't want them to win a championship first year. They won a championship first year, right? Sure. And he did great, but he also led the league. People don't pay attention to this in interceptions.
Sure.
And to me, Stafford, again, my opinion as a fan is he has probably the best arm talent we've ever seen since John Elway, my opinion. Sure. He just didn't put it all together, didn't have an O-line, which is a huge deal. I think that people are starting to see that again, because that's why I think the Lions are so successful right now is their O-line is the most
Correct.
important thing. And then two, he had great receivers. He never had a running game. Ever had a running game. And so, he goes to the Rams and does well. But when Goff was thrown out, when I woke up that morning for that trade, I was excited because to me it was an upgrade because Stafford is a gunslinger. He's a risk taker. He's going to force it down there and say, because he's had Calvin, he's had great players. He's going to force it down there where Goff is more safe. He's going to play a little bit more small ball. He's going to pay attention to, try to hit them on the timing, not like just force things, less turnovers, but not as many touchdowns. Just my opinion. So I'm like, maybe that's what we need. And we got a couple first and seconds. So I thought the trade was totally in our favor. Obviously over time, it's not. So my question is with Hendon Hooker and Jared Goff deserves a deal. Hopefully he gets a deal. Do you think he gets a deal before the season starts? Do you think he doesn't and they ride it out another year since he's on that contract? And then where does Hendon Hooker fit in this in the future?
Yeah, I think he gets a deal when you get into the conversation of the quarterbacks that sit in that like 8 to 15 world. The number one part of that conversation is always like, well, how much? Does he deserve a deal? Of course, but does he deserve $50+ million? I love Jared. Jared's one of my favorite people in the NFL, but that's when you start just from the business element, you go, is that really, are we going to get an ROI on that? Like, are we really going to get a return on investment on that at that number? So that's always becoming the conversation. Is he Kirk Cousins plus? Is he Kirk Cousins minus? And I think that's what Brad Holmes and that organization need to figure out. But I do think that they get that deal done just because I've said this about Jared. I said it, when the trade happened, everyone thought I was an idiot. I said, dude, if you protect him, he could throw with anybody in the NFL because that was my takeaway from my time with him in the Rams. So I do think that they get that deal done because they're a Super Bowl contending football team. And you don't play with that. Certainly not if you're Detroit, who's been searching for this for 30 years. In relation to Hendon, I was fortunate, one of the elements that I get super lucky with at ESPN is being around the college game so much. And I've called Hendon Hooker games at Virginia Tech, and I've called Hendon Hooker games at Tennessee. Just from the player element, he's a really talented kid. He is big, tall, upright. His release is, Jared, one of my favorite things about Jared is like his release is so natural. Hendon's is a little unnatural to me, so I don't love that. Hendon doesn't have a ton of experience. When you go from, being in the offenses that Hendon was in, which was so RPO centric and so pace. We're throwing one-man routes. It's a completely different world going into the NFL, getting into a huddle, calling 3 different plays, getting to the line of scrimmage, making a mic point, changing the formation of the front, communicating what we're doing, and then reading a 2 or 3 level concept. Like that's a completely different world. So Hendon not only coming off of the injuries, getting past that, but he's also playing like NFL football quarterback wise for the first time in his life. So, Hendon is, I don't think Hendon's in the conversation as far as this year. Now, if you want to tell me that he's got a chance to, become part of the conversation in 2025 or beyond, I could sit down and start that, but he is so far removed from the, Jared, the intricacy that Jared gets to play with. I would say that's one of the more detailed offenses in the NFL that Ben Johnson runs with Jared. He ain't running that with Hendon right now, and I think that's a plus for Jared.
That was something I read, and I've talked about another podcast. I talked about it on Woodward Sports one time. It was Lombardi, the offensive coordinator. When he was fired, he had something in an article that stated he said, quote unquote, I had to dumb down things in the offense for Stafford. I don't know how true that was. But that was in an article that I saw. And so that stuck with me when he got traded. And it's not a knock against Stafford, but when McVay, who seems like a puppet master in a good way, meaning I want to call all the plays and the audibles and have everything ready. I don't know if that's what goes on in the Rams, but it seems like that's the case. And Stafford's able to execute better than anybody else. Where I feel like certain quarterbacks can go in and make changes. Is Goff? Am I wrong in what I'm saying? Is Stafford capable of doing that as much or equal to Goff or more, or are they different in that aspect?
Oh, I think
And I know
more
that's
than
a tough
Jared.
question, but
No.
it's a valid one.
Yeah, no, I think more than Jared. Matthew's one of the smartest people I've ever been around. Matthew's one of the smartest football players I've ever been on. No, I was with Coach Lombardi and Joe when it came to that situation. It wasn't the dumbing down because it was a lack of intellect. It was the dumbing down because it wasn't even. It was paring down because Matthew just liked stuff differently than Drew did, and Joe had come from a time in a place in New Orleans where Drew could kind of and Sean Payton did everything, and they didn't run a ton of plays. Drew just made the plays work in different ways, and they had tight ends reading things that we couldn't read when we were there at that time in Detroit. We didn't have those people, so it wasn't an intellectual thing. It was more of an execution thing. I'll be candid with you. When Sean called me about Jared, and I was going to go up there and be with the Rams, he said, I got this young player who's really, really talented. He just doesn't know football. And I need a guy to come out here and teach him football. When I sat down and watched tape with Jared for the first time, Jared didn't know what cover one was. I mean,
Yeah.
Jared didn't know what over, and that's not a knock on Jared. It's actually more of a tip of the cap to Jared that he has learned all that, because at Cal he didn't have it. Like at Cal, they were just catch and throw and run and gun. And so the fact that Jared has grown into this guy that can control all this stuff and change protections and get the run game going in the right direction is a testament to, one, his natural intelligence, and two, then his work ethic. I think they're both really, really intelligent players.
My son plays quarterback, and the reason I wanted to ask that question is he's now learning stuff like that. Cover one, what's going to be open the well, what's a cover two, what. So he's learning that stuff, and he's only 13. But it makes a difference. He works with Coach Greer, Will Greer's dad here in Charlotte.
Okay. Yeah.
So he works with him some, and it's all mental stuff he works with. He's another coach he does the physicality stuff with on and off. But, he's really advanced for 13, can throw the ball like 45 yards. Naturally, but it's the mental part that is really helping his game. And so I asked that. So when I first read that article, I was like, no way, because Stafford's out there changing things. And this was an article a long time ago. But then when the trade happened and you start to see it, I'm like, well, maybe he'll do better with McVay. But all that, what you just said, makes complete sense. I also tip my cap to Jared Goff because he's honest, he's vulnerable. He comes out and talks about, hey, Detroit has changed my life. Like, it's just, and there's no arrogance about that young man at all, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think the city loves him and the players play for him, because he's not me. I don't think Stafford was a me person either. I've had the pleasure of hanging out with him a couple times at some things, and he's one of the nicest people I've ever met. Seemed like one of the smartest people I've ever met. And I know, being a Lions fan growing up, and still, he's one of the best quarterbacks we've ever had, especially arm talent. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Which brings me to J.J. McCarthy. So in the game against Ohio State, the ex-coach for Ohio State was on there, and he kept replaying. Maybe you remember, it was Urban Meyer. He showed that clip like 5 straight times and said, I've never seen anyone make that throw in college
Touchdown pass to
football.
Roman Wilson.
You got it. Yeah. See, you're so good. So that's the kind of talent that it's a Mahomes have, a Stafford has, and JJ has. Now, I don't pay attention as much to these other players, and I know they can run and they're bigger and maybe they've got, but it seems like JJ throws bullets.
Yeah.
At any angle.
Yeah, the way I called JJ's first college football game ever, and I remember he had this play when he broke outside the pocket, ran all the way to his right, saw a guy downfield all the way to his left, made this remarkable throw, and I believe it was versus Western Michigan. I remember being on the broadcast and sitting there going, why is he not the starter? Like, Michigan has been looking for that type of player forever, and I'm a massive fan of his. I think my favorite part of JJ's game is 2 things. I don't think there's a guy in the draft this year that is more confident in their arm than JJ. That touchdown pass you're talking about, when I watch it, I'm actually doing a touchscreen on it today for SportsCenter.
Wow.
When I watch it, I go, you shouldn't throw that ball.
Right.
When I watch it, I go, you don't throw that ball. But then when you hear him, and I think he did an interview with Brad Galley, one of the local reporters in the Detroit area, and he said, well, I knew from studying tape that once they got in that defense, and if I looked off to the right, the backer would step one way, and I knew if I did that, I would get him to step and I could replace him with the throw. Now, I love that about quarterbacks. Like, you tell me you got a plan with what to do with the football. So the confidence And then I don't know if there's a guy that makes the harder throws look simpler. That's a hard throw. Like
Yeah.
you got to throw that ball. It's not on a line, but it's not on touch. It's called like just a firm ball. And so I think he has so many examples of doing that. And so there's stuff to work on his game. I think he
Yeah.
needs to throw with a little bit more touch, and he's very committed to being a rhythm passer, and sometimes that gets him stuck. But those are so fixable. I think I'd be very surprised if he's not a top 5 pick.
He's faster than people think too. They don't realize how
Great
fast he
athlete.
is. He can
Great
run.
athlete.
So
Great athlete. I mean, just think of the Alabama play where he's falling away, catches, great athlete.
yeah. I had Golden Tate on a couple weeks ago, and he's playing a lot.
GT.
Yeah, dude, such a good dude, and he's playing a lot of the pickleball. He loves it. He's got a new what's it called?
Racket.
Racket. There you go. Yeah, paddle. Yeah, he's got the Golden Tate paddle coming out, and we talked a little bit about natural talent, right? He brought up players he's played with, and we talked about Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford. And he said he's been asked many times who's the greatest quarterback he ever played with before Stafford won the Super Bowl. And he would tell everybody Matthew Stafford. They're like, you're crazy. He's like, dude, no, trust me. You get him on a team with an O-line and this. It's not even close, he said, right? But he said the best player he's ever, like most athletic player he's ever been around was Calvin Johnson. And he said, look, going into it, I felt like I'm the greatest receiver. Naturally, when you're in the NFL, you have an arrogance, you have a confidence about you that you're the best. So you wouldn't be there if you didn't have that. He said he would be running goes, nines or whatever with Stafford on the thing. And, he would go out there and he'd have to run. Stafford throw the ball so far, so fast. He'd have to run for his life to catch it. And Calvin would go out there and check his email while he's jogging, eating a hamburger, doing all the things and then just easily And he said, that's the moment I said, I'm not even in this guy's planet. Right.
Yeah.
So, you got to be on that team. What was it like with Calvin?
Calvin's one of my favorite people ever. I often say the best way to describe Calvin was, he had the physical talent of the number 1 pick in the NFL draft and the work ethic of the guy who was undrafted. He's one of the best people, best humans ever been around. It was remarkable to watch him on a daily basis. I played against Calvin in college as well, so I kind of knew of Calvin. The way that he worked was so admirable. I'll never forget he used to run sprints off to the side because he didn't want to blow the receivers out of the water that he was running against, even though he knew he would. The way that he attacked the football in practice, the way that he worked on his route running. I'll give you a quick little CJ story. It was 2000. This is the 0-16 year, so 2008. We're putting into play against the Indianapolis Colts. And the Indianapolis Colts ran 2 defenses that year. They ran cover 3 and cover 2. The simple way to say it is cover 3 is a deep cut the field into a third horizontally. Defenders have a deep third. They give you easy throws to the sideline, okay? And then they play cover 2, which is cut the field into a half. Horizontally, the player is responsible for the deep half, and they don't give you easy throws to the sideline. So we would put this play in where they would put Calvin by himself, and they would run him on a 5-yard hitch route. Run up 5 yards, turn around, Dan's going to get the ball, throw it right to you. And versus cover 3, again, they're giving you easy throws to the sideline. That's an easy play. Get that ball to Calvin, it's 8 yards. So I asked the question one day, I was like, well, what happens if they play cover 2? Now, the cover 2 rule, meaning, again, they're not going to give you that easy throw. There's going to be a defender there. That's a bad play, right? Great.
Yeah.
So we would just say, Calvin, if you see cover 2, just run a go route.
And he'd run
And so
a
I
go
go, right, but he's getting double teamed in that situation. They're taking him away. So, hey, what are we going to do if they run the cover 2? And they're like, just throw it to Calvin. I'd be like, I know, give me something better. And they're like, just throw it to Calvin. So, as the person who's on the field making the decision, I'm the one who's going to look like an idiot, not the coaches. So certainly we call that play in the game, and I'll be friggin' danged that they play cover 2. And I'm sitting there at the line of scrimmage. I'm like, dear God, what are the chances? And so I'm like, you know what? I try to be like a prick. I'm like, fine, I'll throw it to Calvin just to prove my point. Drop back, just launch this toaster to Calvin, 45-yard catch off the double team. And I said, all right, throw it to Calvin. So just a remarkably physically talented guy, but, as talented as he was, the character was better.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do want to wrap up. I know you got a few more minutes, just a couple more minutes. Coming from the NFL and getting into what you're doing now with ESPN. I've talking to Golden. He's actually taking classes. He's trying to, he's getting coaching on doing a lot of that. I've talked to, Prater wants to get into coaching, but I've got a couple friends that know you, that played on the team, that are like, dude, he is crushing it on there, and it's amazing. Talk a little bit about that journey, because I think when NFL players retire, I lost a company that was worth $1 billion, literally lost it, cost me $400 million, and I've had to start over.
Jeez.
And it was something out of my control. It was a product liability issue. I had 20,000 customer systems not working. I mean, it was crazy. It just happened 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. And I had an identity issue because I was on all my TV commercials. I was on TV shows, doing some certain TV shows. I had all these things, and it bothered me. And I've had friends retire. Calvin's one of them, but he's doing his own things because, I've gone to a bunch of his charity events and with his primitive thing with Rob, such a good dude. But a lot of players struggle with identity issues. They leave and then they don't know what to do. They don't feel purposeful. And so I want you to talk about your journey, because you're such a good, a man of faith and talks about it, a man of his family. What was your journey like leaving the NFL and then how, going to where you're at now, doing something you love and making a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate. I struggled with that, though. It just was for a very short period of time, even though I'm deeply rooted in my faith. And even though like being a husband and a dad is by far the most important thing to me, it's hard because when you play, more than likely, and you play in the NFL, you've played football from, let's call it the age of 10 up until, if you're lucky enough to play as long as I did, like 35 years old. So all I've ever known in my life is football. All I ever knew in my adult life was football. And so football set the rhythm of my life. Oh, it's middle of February. All right, we're not doing anything. We're going on a family vacation. March comes. Okay, I got to start getting ready for football. And then football set the calendar.
Right.
And when that was done, you're sitting there going, oh, what now? Like what sets the calendar? And even though I had kids, it's like, you don't know that. You've never experienced having your kids set your calendar essentially, or what the rhythm of your life is. And I remember, it was weird because I loved football so much that when football was over, it was almost like a breakup and I wanted nothing to do with it. I would tell my wife, like, I'm going to get into business, and I took a business meeting or two, and my wife would laugh at me. She's like, you're not a business person though. Like you love football. It was like, I didn't want anything to do with it. I wanted to prove that I was more than just football. And then, I started to break plays down on social media just because I love football. I love the nerd element and the X's and O's of football. And I was only away from like doing, and I'm task oriented and accomplishing for, let's call it a couple weeks to a month. That I didn't have that long extended period of time to try to figure out what I was going to do. And, getting into the media element of things, it allowed me to never go through that dark period of like, okay, what do I do now? And it gave me a new goal. I don't want to say a new purpose, but it just gave me something new to try to go be great at. And, I always told people, I somehow got lucky enough to become one of the best in the world at something, and I wanted to try to become one of the best in the world at something else. And so, I was very fortunate. My kids and my wife, like, it's funny. I'm not one of those people who say, well, being a TV personality is what I do. It's not who I am.
Yeah.
My life is kind of what it is. It's not that my identity's wrapped up in football or being at ESPN, but like it's a pretty big deal of like kind of my everyday life. Yeah. And it doesn't hinder my ability to be the very best husband and father. So it's not that I don't run from that. Like I just don't run from it. I enjoy it and I love it. If I'm going to put all this energy and time into it, like why would I not want to embrace it? So it's been a really cool journey. It's obviously happened way faster than I thought. But I feel like I'm just getting started in it as well.
I think you are too. I think the viewers, they like your take on stuff, the honesty, the funniness, the awkward food that you eat, I think comes up a lot. Someone told me make sure they bring up but you're that character on there. You've kind of created your own your own real character on the platform there, which is exciting, right? And it's fun to see because we don't have a lot of ex-Detroit players. I mean, you do have Nate Burleson, who I love watching, by the
Nate,
way, as well. He's
yeah,
so good.
he's a 10.
He's a 10, but I watched him at the beginning, and I've watched how good he's gotten. And I watched you at the beginning, like the first few, and I was like, oh, Dan's good at this, but you're like great at this now. And that was what we were talking about. He's like, and Golden Tate said it on the episode, was like, he has conquered, he gets it. Like he's done everything he's supposed to do, and he's getting better every day. And it shows, it really does. And so I think that's inspiring because a lot of these players, you feel bad for them, and it's in any sport or anything. That's that identity issue, and they don't know what to do. And it's hard.
Like I I don't know if I've ever struggled with identity issue. I think that um, part of it too, Jason, like I wasn't a superstar,
Yeah.
so I wonder if that like made the transition easy. Like I was a backup quarterback for most of it, so it's like my identity wasn't wrapped up in it even while I was playing because I wasn't the star, even
Right.
though there's 1,500 people on the planet that get to play that position. And so I wasn't wrapped up in it, probably as much as I was in college when I was the man in college type of thing. And so I also, when you are fortunate to be around locker rooms for long enough, you see the best players in the world unhappy,
Yeah.
and you're like, you're beloved, but they're unhappy. And I think, learning through osmosis of like being true to yourself and being who you are and being unapologetic and being convicted like that, I think those were all things that I pulled from those experiences as well that made it easier.
Love your posts with you and your family all the time too. I mean, keep that stuff up. That's always good to see you guys having a good time going on trips
Yeah.
and with the kids and everything. So very inspiring. And not enough people share their joys in life, which is obviously the most important thing. You said being a husband, being a father. I've got
Yeah.
4 kids and 2 grandkids, and
There you
I've
go.
given so much to my last business that I built. I missed out that I think God's given me the opportunity of, hey, look, this may feel like it's a storm, but really there's a blessing at this. And it's me
Yeah.
being better husband, better father, and taking different routes, right? I've opened up a couple of doing things, but like, I'm not letting it take over everything.
Yeah.
I'm making sure I'm balancing that out. And it sounds like you obviously have great control of that. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate. Again, I think that when you get to the top and you realize there's way more than getting to the top's amazing. I want to get to the top again. Like I thrive off that. I crave it. I do. But it's not like, oh my gosh, I can't get to the top and also be at the top here.
Yeah.
Like I can get to the top at this job and in this industry and also be the husband and father that I want to be. Like those two things do not have to be mutually exclusive of
They
each
can
other.
coexist. That's correct.
Yeah,
It's hard
I
to
don't
do
think we
that
have to
on
run
playing
from
the
that.
game, though, I would imagine, because you're having to go work out and do all the other things. I would imagine maybe that's a little tougher playing the game than it is doing what you're doing.
Yeah, sure, but I think that like we sell ourselves short too much. Like we
Yeah,
can't. Like we can do both. Like we can do both.
I agree. So one last question. We'll wrap it up, and I appreciate your time. Who were you really pulling for when the Rams played the Lions? Because I know, you mentioned, oh, this is who you think's gonna win. Who were you pulling for? And listen, the reason I bring this up is because Stafford said to Prater when they played the week before, or a few weeks before, the only thing I want more than anything is to go to Detroit and kick their ass in the playoffs. That's what he told Prater,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Which is fine. He's competitive. He's supposed to. And then I was there at the game with my son when he came out and they booed him, which is okay. Then they booed Kelly a little bit, which isn't okay, but it's part of the course. And his whole demeanor changed. I don't know if you were there at the game when that happened, and I
Yeah.
don't know what that's like, but dude, he's the villain now. He's coming in. I mean, I think people don't dislike him; they just dislike that team because we got to beat him. All that led to, the Lions won, thank goodness, and the way it worked, and we were all excited, and I think it was our time. And I think he was a little upset at the beginning of that in his press conference. I'm happy for the players. He wasn't happy with the city. He was upset. Emotions. My question to you was, who were you really going for?
Yeah.
And what do you think? Do you think Stafford's over that now of the pain of what he felt when he went back? Because he was beloved for so long.
Yeah. I think who I was really rooting for was the Rams.
Okay.
That's my candid answer. I picked the Rams. I had thought the Rams were the team to go beat San Francisco, the way that they were playing. Um, Matthew wanted nothing more
Yeah.
than to go win one for
Which
Detroit.
is
I think
okay.
that's
People need to know that that's okay.
Yeah, he wanted nothing more. I mean, I've had so many conversations with him when we were together about that. My friendship with Matthew is pretty unique, and pretty sincere. And so I was rooting for the Rams, but mainly because that's who I picked.
Yeah.
When I got into this job, people told me your job isn't to be right; it's to entertain. I don't agree with that. Like, why would I? How could I go to my employer and be like, "Hey, pay me X amount of dollars"? I could do what anybody else does and just say things. Now I want to be right. So when I picked the Rams, I wanted to be right in that regard. And then I obviously took the Lions, and I took the Rams by one in that game. I took the Lions the following week, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't super, happy for the Lions winning. I'm an emotional person. I didn't grow up with a big family, so like my teammates were always my friends, and my teammates became my family. So I think there's that element of it of why I picked the Rams was partly because and mainly because of Sean and Matthew.
Yeah. And then what about him being upset when he left, when the game lost, and the comment that
Do
was
I think
brought
he's
up?
over that?
Yeah.
No.
He wants it this year.
I mean, he's one of the most competitive people I've ever been around. So he's probably the respectfully like you got me last time, but it's coming again type of thing.
Yeah. Well, he did get the Super Bowl ring though.
No doubt. I mean,
how perfect does that look? Trade happens, they win the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah. That was the team that I picked to win the Super Bowl that year. I was like, he'll go win one just because I knew how good he was. I watched it every day.
You think the Lions are going to go far this year?
I do. I think that the Lions are probably, San Francisco is the team to beat, and they should have won that game.
They should have won that game.
Man.
I was truly buying tickets. True story. It's halftime. I'm buying tickets to the Super Bowl. And my wife goes, why don't you wait another quarter? True story. I'm like, you sure? She's like, yeah. Boy, I'm glad I did.
Yeah. One play, just the difference of one play. But I think, they're probably at the top. I think Green Bay will be really good. But I'll be interested. Dan, Brad did such a good job in the past draft or two. Like, that's a pretty big deal. So if he has another really positive draft, I think, I can see them very much so back in the NFC title game.
Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time, man, to talk to me and share everything and come on here and share with our listeners. We've got tons of listeners, a lot of Detroit listeners too, as well, that follow and subscribe. So I appreciate your time, Dan, and thank you, and be blessed, my man.
No, I appreciate it, man. Take care, Jason.
All right, bam.